Before Jackie Chan ever climbed a skyscraper, before Jet Li threw his first punch, before Bruce Lee became a legend, there was a decade that started it all. A time when Chinese cinema was quietly building the foundation of one of the greatest action film traditions the world has ever seen. Hidden gems, forgotten masterpieces, and films so influential, Hollywood directors still study them today. These are the top 10 Chinese action films of the 1960s. The 1960s was the golden age of Shaw Brothers Studio, the Hong Kong powerhouse that built the first true Chinese film industry at scale. And two directors dominated this era above all others. King Hu, a visionary who elevated Wuxia into genuine art, poetic, precise, breathtaking. Chang Cheh, the godfather of masculine action cinema. Where King Hu brought elegance, Chang Cheh brought raw power, brotherhood, and blood. The films on this list are primarily Wuxia, wandering swordsmen, ancient codes of honor, betrayal, revenge, and jaw-dropping martial arts. Think of it as the Chinese equivalent of the Western, but with flying swords instead of six-shooters. We're judging on cinematic quality, historical influence, action choreography, and cultural impact. Let's count them down, starting with number 10. Number 10, The Bells of Death, 1968. Director, Griffin Yue Feng, Shaw Brothers, starring Yu Hua. Opening our countdown, one of the most emotionally raw revenge films of the decade. Yu Hua plays a young man whose entire family is brutally massacred by bandits. He alone survives. From that moment, he makes one ironclad vow to hunt down every killer, one by one. Director Griffin Yue Feng doesn't let his hero feel good about his kills. Every confrontation carries psychological weight. The action is brutal and purposeful. No joy in the violence, only grief transformed into cold fury. The film's title refers to small bells Yu Hua's character uses as a tracking system, a clever detail that gives the film its distinctive identity. For fans of John Wick or Old Boy, this is the ancient ancestor of everything you love about the revenge genre. And the DNA of this film, a lone survivor hunting killers one by one, flows directly into modern revenge classics like Jet Li's Fearless 2006 and even Donnie Yen's SPL Killzone 2005, where personal loss fuels relentless, unstoppable vengeance. Lean, disciplined, and emotionally devastating. Number 9. Return of the One-Armed Swordsman, 1969. Director, Chang Cheh, Shaw Brothers, starring Jimmy Wang Yu. Jimmy Wang Yu returns as Fang Gong, retired from the martial world and living quietly, until 8 deadly swordsmasters, each with a unique and terrifying fighting style, rise to dominate the land. 8 villains, 8 unique weapons, one hero with one arm. Each confrontation showcases a completely different fighting style, chain weapons, hidden blades, poison techniques. Every fight feels fresh. The battles are bigger, Chang Cheh's direction more confident, and the climactic finale is one of the most satisfying action sequences of the entire decade. Narrator VO. The legacy of the one-armed swordsman archetype is immense. The concept of a physically incomplete hero who transcends his limitation echoes powerfully in Jet Li's Fearless and most directly in Tsui Hark's The Blade, 1995, which is essentially a dark, brutal reimagining of this very story, with Zhao Wenzuo playing a swordsman who loses his arm and must rebuild himself from nothing. If you love this film, The Blade is essential viewing. Number 8. Dragon Gate Inn, 1967. Director, King Hu, Union Film. Starring, Shi Chun, Polly Shang Quan. Our first King Hu entry, and immediately the tone of our list shifts entirely. Set during the Ming Dynasty, a ruthless eunuch commander hunts down the children of an official he has executed. The only refuge? A remote inn near Dragon Gate. Shi Chun plays the wandering hero who must protect them. Polly Shang-quan is magnetic as the inn's deadly proprietress. This film's legacy becomes truly extraordinary. Dragon Gate Inn inspired not one, but two major remakes that brought the story to entirely new generations. First, New Dragon Gate Inn in 1992, produced by Sue Hark and directed by Raymond Lee. This version stars Maggie Cheung as the seductive, dangerous inn proprietress, Tony Leung Ka-fai as the villain eunuch, and Brigitte Lin as the heroic swordswoman. It's wilder, sexier, and more kinetic than the original, a Hong Kong new wave reimagining that became a classic in its own right. Then, Sue Hark returned to the well again in 2011 with The Flying Swords of Dragon Gate, this time bringing in Jet Li as the lead hero. Filmed in spectacular 3D IMAX, this version expands the scope to a nearly mythological scale. Massive sandstorms, underground cities, and action sequences that push the boundaries of what Wuxia CGI could achieve at the time. 3 versions, 3 different eras, the same remote inn at the edge of the desert, and enemies circling each other in the dark. That is the power of King Hu's original vision. He created a setting so dramatically perfect that filmmakers keep returning to it decade after decade. And it all started here in 1967. Number 7. Have Sword, Will Travel, 1969. Director, Chang Cheh, Shaw Brothers. Starring David Jeong, Ti Lung, and Ivy Ling Po. David Jeong and Ti Lung, 2 actors who would go on to define Chinese action cinema throughout the entire 1970s, appeared together here in one of their earliest collaborations. Ivy Ling Po provides emotional depth as the woman caught between loyalty and survival. 2 wandering swordsmen are hired to escort a gold shipment through dangerous territory and must fight off a relentless army of bandits standing in their way. What Chang Cheh understands better than anyone is brotherhood as dramatic fuel. The bond between Jeong and Ti Lung gives every fight genuine emotional stakes, 2 men willing to die for each other. The pairing of David Jeong and Ti Lung became one of the most beloved on-screen partnerships in Chinese cinema history, and Have Sword, Will Travel was where it began. Their chemistry here directly influenced how John Woo later crafted the brotherhood between Chow Yun-fat and Ti Lung in A Better Tomorrow, 1986. A film Woo has explicitly cited as his tribute to the Chang Cheh tradition of male loyalty and sacrifice. Number 6. Temple of the Red Lotus, 1965. Director Su Chang-hong, Shaw Brothers. Starring Jimmy Wang Yu and Chung Pei-pei. Jimmy Wang Yu, years before his One-Armed Swordsman fame, stars as a young man who arrives at his father's clan to discover treachery, rival factions, and deadly secrets. Chung Pei-pei appears in an early role that hints at the stardom she would achieve just 1 year later. For 1965, the scope is genuinely ambitious, sprawling sets, elaborate costumes, and action sequences that feel cinematic rather than stagey. The film spawned 2 immediate sequels, which tells you everything about audience enthusiasm. Temple of the Red Lotus established several Wuxia storytelling conventions: the corrupt clan, the hidden heir, the romantic subplot woven through martial conflict that would be refined and repeated throughout Chinese action cinema for decades. You can feel its influence in the clan politics of Once Upon a Time in China, 1991, with Jet Li, and in the treacherous school dynamics of Jet Li's Fist of Legend, 1994. The ground floor from which everything else on this list was built. Number 5. Golden Swallow, 1968. Director Chang Cheh, Shaw Brothers. Starring Jimmy Wang Yu, Cheng Pei-pei, and Lo Lie. Cheng Pei-pei returns as Golden Swallow, but Chang Cheh pivots focus onto Jimmy Wang Yu as Silver Rock, a brooding swordsman hopelessly in love with her. Lo Lie brings menace as the antagonist closing in from all sides. Silver Rock hunts down Golden Swallow's enemies, kills them, and leaves her feathers at each scene, framing her for his violence, making her hunted. A stunning, morally complicated premise. What elevates this film above pure spectacle is its overwhelming melancholy. Silver Rock fights not to win, but because violence is the only language he has for feelings he cannot otherwise express. The character of Golden Swallow, the deadly, independent female swordswoman, became one of the most influential archetypes in all of Chinese action cinema. Her direct descendants include Brigitte Lin's iconic roles in the 1980s and 90s, Zhang Ziyi in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon and House of Flying Daggers, and most powerfully, Cheng Pei-pei herself returning decades later as the villain Jade Fox in Ang Lee's Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon 2000, a casting choice that was a deliberate, loving tribute to her legacy as the original Wuxia heroine. Number 4. The Assassin, 1967. Director, Do Ching, Shaw Brothers. Starring Jimmy Wong Yu and Lisa Chiao Chiao. Jimmy Wong Yu delivers one of his most nuanced performances as a skilled assassin navigating deadly political conspiracy during the Ming Dynasty. Lisa Chiao Chiao brings warmth and tragedy as the woman entangled in his fate. Director Do Ching is genuinely interested in the psychological cost of what his protagonist does. Every fight advances character and plot simultaneously, and the morally ambiguous ending refuses easy comfort. In an era when most action films were content to entertain, The Assassin dared to be something more. The theme of an assassin wrestling with loyalty, conscience, and identity runs like a river through Chinese action cinema, and this film is one of its earliest, purest expressions. Its spiritual descendants include John Woo's The Killer, 1989, with Chow Yun-fat, where a hitman's moral crisis drives the entire narrative. And more recently, Donnie Yen's portrayal of the conflicted warrior in Ip Man carries that same quality. A man of violence who is also a man of deep principle, perpetually caught between what he is and what he wishes to be. Number 3. The One-Armed Swordsman, 1967. Director, Chang Cheh, Shaw Brothers. Starring Jimmy Wong Yu, Lisa Chiao Chiao. The film that changed everything. Jimmy Wong Yu plays Feng Gong, a young swordsman who loses his right arm in a duel, is cast out broken and humiliated, and must remake himself from nothing. Lisa Chiao Chiao is deeply affecting as the farmer's daughter who shelters him and believes in him. Wang Yu's performance is raw, physical, emotionally authentic. Chang Cheh created something entirely new, a hero defined by his wound. A man whose greatest strength came directly from his most devastating loss. The influence of this film on Chinese action cinema is almost impossible to fully measure. Most directly, Tsui Hark's The Blade, 1995, is an explicit, visceral reimagining of this story. But look further and you see its DNA everywhere, in the physical vulnerability of Jet Li's characters in Once Upon a Time in China, in the wounded stoicism of Donnie Yen in Ip Man, and internationally, in Robert Rodriguez's one-armed hero tropes, and even in George Lucas drawing on the archetype for Luke losing his hand in The Empire Strikes Back. Over 1 million Hong Kong dollars at the box office, a genre permanently redefined, one of the most influential action films ever made, anywhere in the world. Number 2. Come Drink With Me, 1966. Director, King Hu, Shaw Brothers. Starring Cheng Pei-pei and Yue Hua. Cheng Pei-pei plays Golden Swallow, a government agent sent alone to rescue her kidnapped brother from a powerful bandit gang. Surrounded, outnumbered, and her enemies make the fatal mistake of underestimating her. Yue Hua is quietly magnetic as the drunken cat, a seemingly dissolute beggar concealing devastating martial arts mastery. Cheng Pei-pei shifts effortlessly between warmth and lethal precision, one of the truly great action performances of the decade. The famous tavern fight sequence remains one of the most elegantly choreographed scenes in Chinese film history. The legacy of Come Drink With Me reaches across decades in multiple directions. The drunken master archetype, introduced through Yue Hua's character here, became one of the most beloved in Chinese action cinema, immortalized years later by Jackie Chan in Drunken Master 1978 and its 1994 sequel. The female wuxia hero that Cheng Pei-pei pioneered here became the template for generations of heroines, from Brigitte Lin in the 80s and 90s to Zhang Ziyi and Michelle Yeoh in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. And in the most poignant casting decision in wuxia history, Ang Lee brought Cheng Pei-pei herself back in 2000, this time as the villain, Jade Fox. A full-circle moment that honored everything she built with this single revolutionary performance 34 years earlier. So why is it still number 2? Because our number 1 didn't just make a great action film, he made a work of art that transcended the genre entirely. Number 1. A Touch of Zen, 1971. Director, Hu, international film. Starring Xu Fun, Shi Chun. Wait, you might be saying, 1971? Isn't this a list of 1960s films? Fair question. Here's the thing. A Touch of Zen was filmed between 1969 and 1970, making it very much a product of the 1960s creative era, and was partially screened at the 1971 Cannes Film Festival, where it won the Prix de Jury, making it the first Chinese-language film to win a major prize at Cannes. The story follows a gentle, bookish painter who becomes entangled with a mysterious woman on the run from corrupt government forces. Hu spends nearly an hour building atmosphere and dread in absolutely no hurry, and then the action arrives like a thunderstorm. The bamboo forest fight sequence is one of the most beautiful action sequences ever filmed. Figures darting through shafts of light and shadow, Hu's camera capturing every moment with the eye of a master painter. The influence of A Touch of Zen on modern wuxia cinema is vast and direct. Ang Lee has cited Hu as his primary cinematic inspiration, and watching the bamboo forest sequence here, then watching the bamboo forest duel between Chow Yun-fat and Zhang Ziyi in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon 2000, the lineage is unmistakable. Lee wasn't just inspired by this sequence, he was paying direct homage to it. Zhang Yimou absorbed Hu's painterly use of color, landscape, and space, and you can feel A Touch of Zen's spiritual presence throughout Hero 2002 with Jet Li and House of Flying Daggers 2004 with Zhang Ziyi. The idea that a wuxia film could be simultaneously a visual masterpiece and a philosophical inquiry, that came from here. And Sui Hark, who remade Dragon Gate Inn twice, has spoken extensively about how Hu's fusion of action and spirituality shaped his entire approach to the genre, from Once Upon a Time in China with Jet Li all the way through his later work with Donnie Yen. Martin Scorsese called it a masterpiece. The Criterion Collection preserved it. Film schools worldwide teach it as a landmark of world cinema. A Touch of Zen didn't just influence Chinese action cinema, it defined what Chinese action cinema could aspire to be. And every great wuxia film made after it exists in some way, in its shadow. That is why it is number 1. And that's the list of the top 10 best Chinese action movies. What strikes me most about this era is how serious these filmmakers were about their craft. Cheng Cheh and Hu weren't making cheap entertainment. They were building a cinematic language, a visual vocabulary for action storytelling that John Woo, Ang Lee, and Zhang Yimou would carry to global audiences in the decades ahead. Every bamboo forest duel, every lone hero at impossible odds, every wound that becomes a source of strength, you are watching the living legacy of 1960s Chinese action cinema. These films deserve to be seen, not as museum pieces, but as living, breathing, genuinely thrilling cinema that holds up beautifully more than 50 years later. Pick one film from this list, clear an evening, put it on, and prepare to be surprised by just how extraordinary Chinese action cinema was before the rest of the world even knew it existed. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and tell us in the comments which 1960s Chinese action film is your favorite. Next time, we move into the 1970s, the era of Bruce Lee, the 36 Chambers, and the birth of the Drunken Master. You do not want to miss it.